All right, guys, welcome to another week of the Laundry List. I'm here without my fearless co-host, Todd Belfer, but we have an exciting guest on this week, James. We're really excited to hear about his experience and as it relates to family dysfunction and all such pertinent, fun, and exciting details of trauma. But before we get started, I'm going to read the laundry list, which our podcast is based on, real quick, and then we'll get into it. James, you've obviously read the laundry list before, right?
I've read the laundry list, and glad you're excited. I'm here. I'm excited too. So both excited. I have heard the laundry list, but I'm looking forward to hearing it again.
Perfect. All right. So this is the 14 traits. 1, we became isolated and afraid of people and authority figures. 2, we became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process. 3, we were frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. 4, we either became alcoholics, marry them or both, or find another compulsive personality such as a workaholic to fulfill our sick abandonment needs. 5, we live life from the viewpoint of victims, and we are attracted by that weakness in our love and friendship relationships. 6, we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and it is easier for us to be concerned with others rather than ourselves. This enables us not to look too closely at our own faults. 7, we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. 8, we became addicted to excitement. 9, we confuse love and pity and tend to love people we can pity and rescue. 10, we have stuffed our feelings from our traumatic childhoods and have lost the ability to feel or express our feelings because it hurts so much. Denial. 11, we judge ourselves harshly and have a very low sense of self-esteem. 12, we are dependent personalities who are terrified of abandonment, will do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience painful abandonment feelings, which we receive from living with sick people who were never there emotionally for us. 13, alcoholism is a family disease, and we became para-alcoholic and took on the characteristics of that disease, even though we did not pick up the drink. 14, para-alcoholics are reactors rather than actors. I remember exactly where I was the first time I read that. Do you?
I remember sitting in if we're going to just refer to ACA or ACA meeting and hearing it, but but I would like to hear where you first.
I remember I got conned into going to a meeting at Todd's house. And I'm sober. I'd probably been sober 5 years at this point, and I thought I was going to another program that we go to, and I remember hearing the meeting start, and I was like, "This isn't the normal verbiage." And then I started listening, and then I remember crying and getting up and leaving, but. Anyways, I have heard your story. You have a fascinating story to me, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to tell your story and I don't want to tell it wrong, but I think one of the things that was fascinating to me about hearing your story before is that you were married, got divorced, spent some time apart, and then got remarried.
That is correct. Is that where you would like me to start?
I mean, wherever you want to start, but I think that to me is very fascinating and kind of beautiful. And in a lot of ways, because I'm going through a divorce, kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
Sure. But you start your story wherever you want. To start from the beginning. What was,
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of things that led to that, of course. And I think for a lot of us and we'll say recovery, there is a story of how we got there, and I think once you've been in long enough, dysfunction just seems like dysfunction. Yep. The story doesn't matter quite as much down the road. But for me, how this all came about, and I will say life looks much different now than it did, even a couple of years ago. And, I'm grateful for that. But, my upbringing, like a lot of us, was rather dysfunctional. I had one house where there was a high level of addiction, alcohol, pill popping, whatnot. And that was with my mom and a couple stepdads. That was one house. The other house, my parents divorced when I was about 10. That house was kind of like a perfectionist house. And so as a kid navigating these two things, I look at it now as I became a technician. I was sort of a rescuer in the one house, always trying to keep things together. had a younger brother that I helped raise. The other house, I would go to my father's house, and it was more in that house. I feel like I was trying to extract love or approval from my dad and then his wife then. And they had, I'd say, a codependent, a meshed relationship is what I would just call that now, is how I would understand that. So to go back and forth, I would say I kind of just lost any sense of self. Mm-hmm. It was whatever I needed to be to try to get that approval.
People pleasing and all the things that you and I share in common.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a high level of trying to control and then to get needs met, manipulate. So fast forward, over time as I was growing up in these houses and even my dad's house, there was also a great deal of fear in that house too. My dad had some anger issues and I used to think that everyone's house I just thought it'd be normal to have holes in your walls and in your doors. Because I got so used to always seeing that in his house. There's just holes in the doors always. And so I remember going to other people's houses as a kid thinking, oh, it's so strange that other people don't have holes in the doors. I thought that was just a normal thing. And he would drive. He would be a rager when he was driving. And I can remember my brother and I just being, scared to death of the car because he'd peel it out and he was just real angry when he was driving. So there was like a fear. My dad was a real big guy and we were intimidated by him.
Yeah.
So, that was that house. And then we were there a couple weekends a month and then we'd go home. And then it was the chaos of the other house. And we were that house on the block where the police were there. The police were there looking for somebody or were there to bring somebody home so it was chaos. I can remember one time my stepdad didn't even make it into the driveway. He had passed out in his truck and my mom said to leave him there. So we had neighbors come into the house. Hey, there's something wrong with so-and-so. And my mom said, just leave him. And so, and other times they would get violent with each other. And my brother and I would sit in our rooms and we'd wait for my mom to yell, call the police. So like that was that house, they're so different, but so you kind of move forward and I get into high school and I can remember at some point in high school thinking, I don't really know who I am. Mm-hmm. I can just be whatever I need to be in any situation, in any group of friends. And then, by the time we get to senior year, my parents started buying alcohol for us. So that was my senior year. That was my, that was my claim to popularity is I had the parents who would buy the alcohol. So I would come home on maybe Wednesday or Thursday with a shopping list and I would get home from school on Friday and we'd have our alcohol for the weekend. So that was kind of defined my senior year. At some point my senior year, I ended up getting a DUI and this was the first time my mother tried to discipline me, really that I can remember. So I was grounded and about a month in that house, I just couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want to be there anyways, just because it was so chaotic. And then just other things that were going on there too that were unhealthy. So I had actually moved in with a friend halfway through senior year and finished high school living with a friend. So at some point, by God's grace, I'll say maybe around age 20, I just, it came to mind, I just can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't want to live this life anymore. Went back to school and eventually graduated and had a decent job. I met my wife at that time. I was 22, 23. Well, there's a little more to this. Actually, why not just share all the drama? So I actually met a girl when I was probably 21. We got married and I went into that not really wanting to, but because I had no sense of self, everybody else thought we should.
I know all about that. I remember being in Cabo being like, this is such a horrible idea. I'm getting married tomorrow, but I can't do anything about it. It's like you're like you can see yourself in, you're like, this is happening and I want it to stop, but I can't. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just full speed ahead. And but this is what dysfunction does, and this is how it manifests in the world with all this stuff, these survival traits as a kid, as an adult, this is how they were. So I'm getting married, maybe 9-10 months later, she had moved out, wasn't working out. And then I met my wife, my next marriage. So I was already early 20s and already, on this fast track to a second marriage. So I met my wife. She got pregnant pretty quick. And, but I had decided I was going to be an adult. I'm going to do this, and this is great. It's all working out. I'm going to do this way different than my parents did. We're going to have a healthy house. We're going to make a nice, stable environment for our kids, and this is going to be good. And, but as we learn, and what I learned in ACA is that, unfortunately, this cycle of family dysfunction gets passed down. It's a programming that starts with our parents, gets passed down, and so I had it. And even though I didn't have, when my wife got pregnant, we both had stopped drinking. We weren't doing anything. We just kind of went right into, we're going to be parents and be responsible, and we're going to do this. And but unfortunately, the thinking sinks in, the control, the manipulation, I'll say I had a rescuer mindset. I rescued my wife, I'll say, in a lot of ways. And
do you feel like at that time you married somebody like your mom?
Yeah. Exactly. And so I did. And so we were married 16, 17 years. And in that time period, there was a lot, and just to save the drama of it. But you can imagine, as, my wife was also an adult child. Her family, her dad left when she was a baby. Her mom was pretty unavailable for her growing up, and her stepdad was in a good situation for her. So, as it even says in the Red Book, we find each other with impeccable accuracy.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
So, two adult children. So, and then going back to my parents, as we said, it's kind of passed down. My mom had a very abusive home, sexually and physically abusive. And then my dad, his father was an Air Force pilot and had died in a plane crash when he was young. And then his mother, and I don't know all the details, because as we also talk about in ACA, we don't always disclose dysfunction in detail. So I don't know all of it, but his mother ended up committing suicide when he was in high school. So, that's where the compassion comes in, because, he had a lot of anger issues, and I kind of associate there was probably a lot of things there that, were unresolved. And
isn't that amazing? Once we kind of do the work, that we can, at least for me, and sounds like you, that we view our parents in a completely different light. Mm-hmm. Like, I view my parents now completely different than I did 2 or 3 years ago.
Sure.
And I realized that they were doing the absolute best that they could with the things and tools that they were given.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes it like this very, at least for me, even over the holidays, like a very beautiful kind of thing that hey, they were doing all that they could. Sure. Right. And I had an interesting conversation with my uncle on the way over here, and he was like, I'd love to come on your podcast and, tell everyone, about how, breaking the cycle, and his, my cousin's in the car, and he's like, yeah, except that time that you punched the hole in the wall. And it, so it's like, no one escapes this. No one does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And, so I would just say that's the story behind it all, right? That's the stuff. And we have our stories, but I would say what has happened now, and I'm maybe 2.5 years into recovery for this stuff. And I can remember first walking in to an ACA room, and it was a men's group. It was I had been to a couple of ACA meetings, kind of in and out of it, but I went to this men's group, and there was energy in there that I hadn't experienced in any other. And I think because of the level of recovery that had already occurred when I got there. Yeah. And I can remember feeling a little intimidated. Everyone kind of knew each other. A lot of energy, but there was one thing, and it's like, wow, I want what these guys have.
For sure.
Because I am not this.
Yeah. It's infectious.
Yeah, it is. So that's where it kind of took off. And I think a lot of this stuff, we kind of get it by osmosis, and then we get it by practicing it because we know how the world works. Things will keep showing up until you master it, and then you can move on. And, there's always choices that you're presented with. And sometimes one option is easier than the other, but one option seems to have some integrity tied to it, where the other doesn't. And as time goes on, you start making these choices, and they're a little tougher in the beginning because they're new, but over time they sort of compound. And over time, you just kind of end up in a little different place than you were. And I think that's, really being around these guys in this group I just heard things I had not ever heard before. First of all, I mean, just the deep, intimate things you just wouldn't share, but it almost seemed like it was like a so what to these guys. Like, here's the situation in my 20s and 30s, and the things that were disclosed, I couldn't imagine having disclosed those things. I had stuffed and repressed so many things by that point and just pretended things didn't happen, which one of our traits is denial.
For sure.
And I was a master of denial. Yeah.
I think sometimes even to this day, I can get that. It's almost like a form of delusion, the denial. Like things aren't as bad as reality. Like I can put myself through an extreme amount of abuse, whether it's financially, personally, or romantically because of that. Like it's not that bad. It's that little denial. And that's how at least for me, I relate a lot to your story. Like that's how we had to get through our childhood. It's not that bad.
No.
No.
And it can even be so bad as to, it is just going on, but I don't want to acknowledge it. I want to own this. And, cause it's hard. It's hard to do. Yeah. So, over time of attending those meetings, gosh, what a difference. And I fortunately met a really great sponsor who also was just of that. He had this genuine kindness about him, but also I could tell had strong boundaries, and he just knew who he was.
Yeah.
And it seemed like some of these people, and Todd's not here today, and you and Charles, you guys know who you are now. And that was, I think, is one of the biggest things I have after the last couple of years come away with is like, hey, I have a sense of self. I know who I am. And man, what a blessing to be at that place. But, so that I'm kind of just summarizing real quick, couple of years, but there was a lot to it. I mean, a lot of it is, you go through the 12 steps and you're just willing to look at some things and write down some things and acknowledge things that
blameless inventory,
right? That hadn't done that in the past. And it really kind of clears out everything. And that's how you kind of start getting to that point where it's like, hey, now these feel like so what's. Like it was the past, but that's, you only have right now. You only have the present. There's no past hanging off of me. You can't pull it or find it. It's just like a story of the past until it all kind of becomes so what's. It doesn't stuff kind of weighs you down until you just acknowledge and own it. Like, here's my humanness. This is the thing.
Feel your feelings. They are what they are, and keep on going.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely, there's so many aspects to ACA and recovery.
No,
it's
for
hard
sure.
to narrow it down. But, I think that getting that sense of self too, that was huge. And I think that probably happened after working the 12 steps somewhere in there. There's all these traits in the workbook that we use, and you have to circle what you think you are. And so I did that exercise, and it was like, wow, okay, I'm dependable, I'm kind, I'm empathetic, I'm spiritual, I'm an ACA member. You go through these things, and I remember at some point thinking oh, I have an identity now. My identity used to be stuff I did, how much work I did at my house or what I could do to stay busy, whatever hobbies I had, whatever stuff I could tell people that sounded impressive. And I learned after working the program, that's not your identity. Those are, that's how you show up in the world, but it's not an identity. So, and I even used that list. I had a job interview maybe 3 months ago, and I was a master of going into an interview and trying to figure out what they're looking for, and I'll just mold myself and then they'll hire me, right? And I took the book out and I reviewed that list before I went in, and I decided I'm just going to stay within myself. This is what I am, and just do my best and just be free in this interview. And it actually ended up being several interviews over, maybe 6 weeks. And I didn't get the job, but it was okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, isn't
it one of those things that when you're truly being yourself, the results don't matter.
It doesn't matter.
And it's like, I remember, when I wasn't being myself, I would get so much fear and anxiety about the outcome.
Right.
Because I was molding it to manipulate to get what I wanted. Hence, I was tying all the things I was doing to the outcome. Where now I can be myself. And if you don't like me for who I am, then that's your problem. Right.
Right.
The one thing I would love to hear, because it fascinates me, the doing the work and like that fundamentally impacting and changing relationships. So like what can you talk about how we heard a little bit about how your relationship was previous,
right? But
how is it now?
So it's interesting because I think the last time we talked, so we've been married about a year now. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, and because things aren't perfect in this world, things have surfaced that are challenging. Yeah. And there are things that aren't quite going well. Mm-hmm. But I would say how that's different though is that I know that I'm just being my authentic, honest self in the relationship, and I'm showing up every day. And in the relationship, it's easier when both people do that. And we've had some issues where maybe not both people are doing that. But I don't want to kind of get it totally into the drama of all that at the moment, because I know it's tough because it is a good story. We had 3 years apart, and we decided to give it a go. We have a son with special needs. The other son is graduating high school this year. My wife also became a counselor while we were divorced. Yep. So she kind of had her own path in her recovery. And I would say the things that have come up is just relationally, because we're both much more grounded in ourselves. We realize we're very different. Yeah. But there's a piece to this because it doesn't have to be a bad thing. So we've communicated that to each other pretty well.
Where before you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Would not have communicated. It would have just been like, there's some
on.
discomfort here. Let's go do something to, stomp down this discomfort. And so, now we're both able to communicate, and we've even talked like it's kind of funny to say this here, but this may not work out, and it's okay. And we're both at peace with it. Yeah. Which is totally different than how it was. Yeah. The first time, right? Right. Yeah. And I was able to tell her in a recent conversation, I love you whether we're together or not. Mm-hmm. And, we gave it a valiant effort. Yeah. And, so, and on some level it's, I trust God's will here, and I'm leaving it open to let God's hands in there a little bit and maybe help work some things out. But but it's been challenging. And because, and there was maybe some moments where maybe because there was some excitement of getting back together. We probably kind of moved a little quick in that. So probably since the last time I saw you, there has been some changes. And I will admit, there was a little bit of denial I was still carrying about some things that were going on. And once I could tell it was weighing down on me a little bit. Yeah. And then, so once I was able to kind of open up, it kind of released some of that. So given all that to say, I've learned it's not a bad thing if relationships don't always work out. In the past, it would have been like I would have been just hanging on by fingernails. And you would have never admitted that there was a problem. No. Yeah, because I know for me, I trudged on till the very end. Yeah. It's really working. Therapy's, the couple counseling is really going great. We're really doing this, we're really doing that. And in all actuality, it probably made it worse. Yeah. Because I gave her ammo to throw back at me. Yeah. You kind of dig in a little bit. Yeah. So, but also in that, there's some other relationships that I'll talk about. Yeah, for sure. And I'm really grateful for ACA to this. Of course. First of all, I'll say I have some of the best friendships I've ever had in my life. That's one aspect of things that have changed. And it feels like just have a lot of friendships. You know, it's not just even a few people. I've gained so many friends through our recovery work, but just in other areas of life where I've been able to, I used to have walls up and I didn't want you to know what was behind this wall. I mean, and so I kind of have this persona,
of course,
and it's fragile when you have a persona like that. And, you know, so little things will happen and then the inner critic comes up and, you know, how could I do this or say this and, you know, and all this stuff. And it just goes downhill. You know, I don't have that now. So I feel like I can be very free and open. And so the friendships I have really developed. And so I will tell you, usually my side of the family I see about once a year on Christmas, and I see that date on the calendar and it'll be looming. And I'm not looking forward to this Christmas party.
As soon as December 1 comes, the panic sets in that's happening.
You know, and I hadn't before this year, I haven't really talked to my dad, and there's some things that are just left over. This was like an opportunity with recovery work that was kind of my next task to him. It was my dad. So he was going to be there this year at the Christmas party. That's usually when I talk to him. And I usually, I go into this probably with my very critical, judgmental mind, and I know how everyone's going to be, and I know that I'm, you know, I always like Bob D, the AA speaker. He uses that term smugly superior. Yeah. I was smugly superior to everyone, you know, because I felt like people were more dysfunctional than me, so I could be superior. But as soon as I meet somebody who's more secure functioning, I feel very inferior.
Inadequate. Yeah.
Yes.
And immediately, within seconds.
So with my family, I could feel very smugly superior. So, but something changed this year with ACA and just other kind of work that's similar. I've really just allowed people to show up as they can. Mm-hmm. And I've been practicing this in so many areas with work and other areas. Because as you already said, people are doing the best they can. Yeah. They really are. If you could do better, you would. In other situations, you can even point to and say, well, they could do better. Well, I don't know, because they probably would. And whether or not they choose not to, I don't know. It's not up to me.
And we're not inside their head, right? You don't know what battle they're fighting. And I really try to take that to heart. And I had a very similar experience. I saw both my mom and dad for the first time in 3 years on Christmas.
Oh, my goodness.
And I went there with an open mind of like, because I became aware because I've been going to a lot of therapy, and the way that I have set boundaries is just no contact. And that's not a boundary. That's just avoidance. So going and being able to have a conversation, and when something starts going the wrong way, being able to say, hey, look, I want to keep this cordial. I love you. Like, let's enjoy it. We don't need to, you know, bring things up that, you know, are going to inflammatory the situation. And it was very beautiful. And my mom, who we've had a very tumultuous up and down, and, you know, I really look at her in that she's doing the best she can. Mm-hmm. And I hold her at no fault because, you know, like your parents, they're just a product of their upbringing.
Right.
And, you know, she said that she's been listening to the podcast, and she's glad that I am getting help with the trauma from my childhood.
Wow.
So it was a very, very cool Christmas. It's the best Christmas present I've ever gotten.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah. So
that's great. That's just the healing effect of that. Like, you can't, so invaluable. There's nothing else that compares.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all because of the guys that you and I both share as friends.
Right.
Being able to call them and being like, hey, look, and they're like, yeah, dude, just go do it. Walk through it. Whatever happens, happens.
Right.
And you know,
I'm so happy. Well, I kind of had a similar experience. So I went to this Christmas party and I just felt different this year. Yeah. Actually, I'll just say I probably just felt different anyways, but I just went in, I was like happy to see everyone. Mm-hmm. I don't know. In the sense of like, not that I made myself be happy. It was like just internally, I think in general, I'm just grateful for how people can show up in the world.
Do you think it's because you're finally happy with yourself because you know who you are?
That would be a great explanation for it. Maybe. I don't know. That's just maybe could be a factor.
Maybe a, I don't know.
That's true. I'll have to think on that, but you could be right. So, you know, I got there and it was like, I enjoyed talking to people. I wasn't judging my cousins, and, you know, I have a cousin who's, has got, you know, pierced everything and things drilled into her head and head shaved and tattooed. And I've got, these other cousins. And normally I would just sit there and I couldn't even like hear what they had to say because I'd just be, judging and, super critical. And so, but I was able to just be open and I felt very free. And I was just grateful for how she does show up in the world. And this is like how she expresses herself in the world. Like, this is great. If you're happy, well, I'm happy. Mm-hmm. And so it just seemed like it was one conversation after another. I just felt so much joy at this party. And the next day my aunt had messaged me and she just told me how great it was to see me and I love you and I miss you. And I don't know, it seems like maybe we don't always hear that a lot. So it meant a lot to hear that. And so also while I was there, I spent a good amount of time talking to my dad and I haven't done that in a while. And my stepmom, it's been a prickly relationship since I was a kid. And I just felt very free and open. I didn't judge her. I wasn't critical of her. It was just, hey, it was, it was so nice to just be have this presence together as two people. Like we're just two beings and we're sharing this space together. And this is great. It was just so different. Yeah. And so while I was there, I asked my dad if they live out of town. They live in Colorado. And so he was going to be here still a few more days. So I asked if he'd be available New Year's Day since I would be off work. So we actually got together New Year's morning and we had breakfast and we asked, and even that was kind of our typical relationship, kind of externals, like what are you up to? What are you doing? And they're building a house. And it's all this kind of stuff, worldly stuff, but nothing too personal. Mm-hmm. So after breakfast, I asked if he wanted or if he had time to go for a walk. And he did. So we ended up walking and I told him, while we started walking, I had in my mind, like, I have some things to share, So I asked if I could make amends for a few things. This is like one of those like hanging things I haven't done after my 12-step work was this amends process with my parents. And this is I guess I have to fill in the gap of what this amends was about. But about 5 years ago, my brother passed away from suicide. And when this happened, the relationship wasn't great with my parents anyways. And this just seemed to like strain it beyond what was even what was functional at that point. Mm-hmm. My mom was already still in addiction and it just kind of she really didn't recover from that. So it's kind of a little side story, but I'll just focus on my dad. And at that time, my mother and my father don't get along still to this day. And more on my mother's side, a lot of resentments towards my dad. And there were just a little bit of drama around that event. And I just told my dad some things that weren't helpful at that point in time. And I basically just cut him off, almost kind of what you described. I just decided I'm done with both of you. I'm not going to be in between your guys' stuff anymore. And I'm done. And I was busy at that time. I handled all this stuff with my brother's situation. I mean, when that happens, it's considered a crime scene. And there's a lot to deal with. And so I was pretty busy. I kind of handled all of that. And so I just didn't have any extra energy for their stuff. And so I cut them off. And so that's why we really only see each other at Christmas. And even then it's been kind of brief conversation. And so I feel like this was really one of those things that's just been hanging over for a long time. Like I see my part in it and how, my dysfunction at that time and how
But you were doing the best you could too.
The best I could in my reactive state. Yeah. I was a reactor. So, I will admit all 14 traits do apply to me that you read off there. And so reacting is one of them. And so when we started walking, I told them like, I know what you wanted. And there were some things he was asking for at the time. And I hate to be general, but just for sake of time, there were some things and I just couldn't, because I was doing everything else. He wanted to basically, my mom had like a little gathering at her house and he wanted to be there and knowing my mom and how her drama and that wasn't going to work. And I told him that, and he was forcing the issue and that he wanted to be a part of that. And I just told him he can't. And then it went downhill, but that's kind of the little backstory on that. But anyways, I apologized for that, and I said, I know that was hard on you too. He died and you want to be part of this this thing. And, you know, and I look back on it now and, you know, these are just kind of minor details and everything, but it ended up becoming a big thing because we didn't talk for many years. And so I apologized and he said, oh, you know, I know you were dealing with a lot and, you know, and I'm sorry that, you know, I you know, reacted the way I did as well too. Obviously this is stressful for him too. So, when you look back, like nobody's functioning on, all their, you know, some of their neurons are going to be, you know,
no one got 10 hours of sleep and has eaten 3 meals.
Hyperactive state. Yeah. Like what just happened, you know,
clear mind.
Right. And, so yeah, he was just like, so as we were talking, I noticed how present he was. And so I asked him like, well, can I share some more things? And so, after we kind of had that process and I really like went into my experience as a kid, you know, going back and forth between the two houses and then, kind of all the way forward through the marriages and then, into recovery work and what I've learned. And he said, you know, he's like, I've been kind of working on similar stuff. And he's like, I'm just so sorry I wasn't there more for you guys growing up. And, I don't know, it was like our first serious conversation. Well, I don't know. I'm 45, so I guess 45 years. Yeah. So I ended up, it's funny. I did the guilt thing because it ended up being a 2-hour walk. So that's a lot of time. And I did most of the talking. And I think all this energy came up and he was so present listening. I felt like I overshared in some ways. But he was so open and he was just so free. And yeah, later that night, he just texted me and said, I love you. I appreciate that you were able to open up. And so it was neat,
That's
you
so
know?
cool.
So, yeah. So I think, and we texted here and there too. So, you know, and like, so without ACA and this type of work, I mean, I would have been stuck in my own thinking with my old resentments and, you know, just all these walls and
shut off to the world. And,
smugly superior.
Superior. I like that.
And, yeah, it's so neat to be able to like open up and feel free and have that joy. And so I'd say, you know, those are some of that was just, you know, kind of recent events, but those are huge.
Yeah. Huge. I mean, very similar. And it's one of those things that before you start the work, you don't even think are possible.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you were to tell yourself 3 years ago that you'd be walking New Year's Day and, you know, all that transpired, you probably think you're insane.
Probably.
Yeah. And it's just you know, I'm for sure very grateful because it has provided me a life and a freedom that I didn't think was possible.
Right. Yeah. And I remember when you were going through your divorce too. And man, I empathized with you because, you know, that pain you were feeling, you know, anyone who's been there, you know, that pain, you don't wish it on anyone. Somebody you don't like. I mean, you just wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Yeah. I wouldn't wish it. Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, and oh man, I remember that. You know, seeing you in that state. So it's so nice to see you now. Like, you know, stuff's all kind of comes up in waves, you know, it's heavy grief, heavy, you know, anger, it's all there, you know, and
regret, remorse,
sure.
Shame. Yeah. I think that's the, and I will say, I think cause I haven't talked about it cause I haven't been on the podcast very recently, but is the hardest thing for me now is I've accepted that we're not romantically involved anymore. We're not even, and that whatever's going to happen with that is fine. Like I've accepted that. The hardest part for me is accepting, because we were friends first, is that the way that the pathway of that we're going is that eventually we'll become strangers. And that's like a very hard kind of concept to like really wrap my head around and like accept and be okay with.
Sure.
Is that like we will eventually just be, you know, two random people, you know, driving down the street that have no regard that each other exists, right? Like you know, if you or I were to drive home, we're going to cross paths with 100 people that will never know their names, never know what they're about. And eventually that's what'll happen.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's kind of like the last piece of it that I'm struggling with is that, and it's just because I care, and maybe because I have healed and I am healing, that I genuinely just care as a human. and I want nothing but the best for her.
Yeah.
And it hurts me to see the reaction and the things that are transpiring, because it is obviously signs of a very hurt person.
Right.
And not that I caused it or that I can fix it, but just as another human being, just if you were saying going through pain, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But
no,
it's
yeah.
I've also gotten to the point too with it that I'm very grateful for exactly how it happened, when it happened, and all the pain and all the experience.
Yeah.
Like I would do it again.
Right.
Because of the freedom and really truly getting in touch with myself is worth all of that. All of the madness, all of the sleepless nights, all the crying.
Yeah.
Can't stop crying so hard that you have to pull over because you don't want to crash your car. The anger of just, you wanting to just destroy everything, even your own life. Like, I'm grateful for all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the paradox of it all.
Yeah.
Like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
It was so tough, but because you're through the other side of it, or because you went through it in a healthy way, right? Because there were options.
There for sure. And I definitely veered into the unhealthy options there for a little bit. And then I was like, this isn't going to work. We need to get back online,
Yeah.
I tried to find the next ex-wife like very quickly and that didn't pan out well.
Yeah. The truth.
Taking her to weddings and dinners and people are looking at me like they're like, didn't you just get divorced? You're like, yeah, isn't it great? But everyone was so kind and lovely about it. So
yeah. But it was part of your process, to grow, your mechanism for working through that. And, but I identify with what you're saying too. You're thinking about like, oh, this person will just eventually be so, it'll just be like a story of the past.
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible? You spent all this life together, all this time together, all this growth together, and all, how is it that way? But it seems to be the spiritual nature of the world, and ACA is a spiritual program, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like we're on a path. There's a reason. Things are showing up for a reason. Mm-hmm. And, why are some people like sitting here talking about recovery work and these things, and then other people are on their deathbeds and nothing ever changes? They're just angry, resentful, and they want their whole life that way. Why is it we're sitting here? But there was something attractive about growth and like, this isn't working anymore. I want something new. There has to be something,
There has to be a better way is what I got to. Like there has to be a way to fix this.
Right.
And I think the other thing that, you had a great New Year's Day, and the last thing that I did to try to like kind of leave all that in 2023, and I definitely feel lighter as this year's go on, is I had letters and pictures and books and stuff that she had given me over the years. Like when I was in rehab, she wrote me a bunch of letters. I had those. Okay. She wrote, she gave me the places you'll go and wrote like a beautiful thing in it for an anniversary on the back page. And I was keeping all those things because I think in part of my head was like, if we get back together, like those are things I'm going to want to keep and I'm going to want to still have. Right. But I had to let those go. Right. So I had a nice bonfire and let those stay in 2023.
As you say that, I identify with that because there's some level of attachment to this person. Right. And sometimes our idea of them isn't even accurate.
No.
Especially when you're going through different emotions and pain, you just remember things differently. It's not always an accurate picture of the situation. Sure. Like you're where you are for a reason. Like you're not together for a reason. And I think you forget why.
And I think I know for me, I fantasize and remember all the great and amazing things. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's a coping mechanism from what I did as a kid, the denial we talked about.
Right.
But I have a harder time remembering all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Like the bad stuff isn't vivid and I can feel it, but like all the good stuff, I can still smell, taste, and feel like it's happening again.
Right.
And I think over romanticize that.
Yeah, it's true. And I can now kind of beat on both sides, going through a divorced and then remarrying the person. I've noticed there is kind of a trend, and not everyone, but I've seen it where there's like this attachment to some exes. I've seen it in recovery work. I was one of those people. I was attached to my ex-wife. And, I loved her. I love her, but it's a little bit attached too. But it's one of those things like, but I wasn't at that level of recovery or awareness to have seen that at the time.
For sure.
Now I see it, cause like it was kind of this really neat love story. Like, oh, you guys are back together and everything's perfect. It may not work out that way. But at the same time, like, it's okay. Like, that's the difference of it. Like, it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And at least you won't have the regret that you didn't try. Right.
It just didn't work out, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's definitely going to that place, but it's possible. But it's okay. Like, I can be open to it. I feel comfortable enough in myself to say it's a possibility. And I don't have to go into all of this stuff like hanging on and
the melodramatic, masochist,
reaching for life, whatever I can get to, survive the experience. Yeah, I don't have
she's
to do
a life
all that.
raft, and I'm going to drown us both.
Yeah, like it's okay if we're together. It's okay if we're not together, and that almost seems like the ideal for any relationship. As we recover, become more secure, functioning people, you just meet people that are more compatible and not compatible. Well, it's okay if they're not compatible people. You can let them go, and then you just can. I think secure, functioning people do that naturally. Is to where we're like
horrible finishers. Let's, You want to go to Van Buren right now? Yeah, I'll go with you. Why not? As long as you promise to be my friend.
Yeah, it's funny. So in my recovery work, it's like I was one or 1.5 year into recovery when I decided to remarry my ex-wife, and. Now I look, okay, now I got another year of wisdom, and I realize all the things that I didn't know back then. I think as time goes on, like, it's actually the more I don't know as time goes on, not the more I learn.
Yeah.
It's just the more I don't know. And so as I go through life, like, I just know less and less, it feels like. But, but looking back, there were still things that I had an attachment to her, and I kind of was overlooking some things, So, but the difference now, like we talked about, we can talk about those things, and the same for her, right? It's not
one-sided.
I'm just 100% of my 50%. Yeah. It goes both ways. And, but that's where we can be adults now. We don't have to live in our 10-year-olds or 14-year-olds, getting emotional about it. So yeah, that's kind of been I wish it was an amazing love story, but we've kind of learned a lot too. Still could be. Yeah. But, we're a year into it now, and, there's definitely some challenges that have come up, and we'll see how it goes.
And I think the one thing I will say is I don't think Todd talks about it, Morris talks about it, is that no relationship's perfect.
Right.
You got to do the work.
Yeah.
But at least now you and I, and, I'll speak for Todd on this, is that we're okay if people leave, where before we definitely weren't. Where if a business partner or friend or romantic lover, if they decide to leave, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, we're going to be okay. Yeah, we are whole and complete within ourselves. It doesn't make us more of a person. We're not more whole all of a sudden because of someone else and
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful feeling. Well, James, I really, really, really appreciate, having gotten to know you over the last couple of years and being on this journey with you. And thank you for coming on to the laundry list.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a work in progress, so just keep plugging away, and thanks for having me. And, it was great to see you here.
Absolutely. And, so that's all we have for this week on the laundry list. Next week, Todd will be back. And, if you need to get a hold of us, send us an email, reach out to us on Instagram, YouTube, wherever you listen to the podcast. And, if you want to come on, we haven't had a listener request to come on. I think that would be cool here in the new year. So reach out, and we'll figure out a way to get you on. So, with that, we'll see you next week.